Good morning, everyone. This is Mrs. D'Amato, or good afternoon, depending on when you're listening to this. This is Mrs. D'Amato, and today we're going to be talking about Strategy 5, Making Inferences. And really, when we're making inferences, what we're doing is reading between the lines. We're finding out not what the author has told us, but what the author hasn't told us, but wants us to know. So let's practice this strategy today. Little bit of an introduction, recapping what we've talked about so far as we reviewed our other strategies. We know that good reading skills are essential, not just for success in school, but also for success in everyday life. Good reading skills help us navigate the world. They help us make good decisions. They help us connect with others. We're going to explore strategies excuse me, during this particular unit that help us become a better reader, more effective, and more engaged. And so here's the fifth lesson in our unit. To review what we've talked about so far, we have reviewed our check your understanding strategy. That is, let me hide this, the read, stop, retell, reread, or read on strategy. This is a great strategy that we use to help us pay attention to our understanding as we read. So remember, we read, we stop, we retell what we just read to ourselves. And you could even include that retell on an annotation with a check mark, and that could be one of your annotations. Then we choose either reread, could I write that retell down? If I couldn't, then I need to reread. And if I could write that retell down, then I need to read on and do another retell in a few paragraphs. So a great way to annotate what you're doing is to just include a retell after every page or 2 pages. The second strategy we talked about was making connections. We know that reading becomes much more engaging and interesting when we can relate it to our own lives, to other texts that we've read, or to the world around us. And we've practiced making those connections with Post-it notes as well. Know that we can make those text to world, text to text, and text to self connections in annotations by using that infinity symbol on a Post-it note and annotating one of our connections, either telling us how it reminds us of a situation in the world, something similar in a book we've read, or that it reminds you of something that you've done yourself. We didn't explicitly talk about this in credit recovery, but another really great strategy is summarizing main ideas. So we've practiced before with the somebody wanted but so then strategy of creating a summary. And just like when we do a retell, we can do a summary, and a summary and retell are essentially the same thing. We can annotate those summaries with a Post-it note, and that's another really great idea for us to help for us to focus on the most important parts of what we're reading. Asking questions while we read, that's the strategy that we just finished talking about a couple of weeks ago. We know that good readers are always curious. We know that asking questions helps keep us motivated to read the text. And so asking questions is a great way for us to be a researcher or a detective, putting clues together as we read. We know why and how questions are best for this. And the way we practice this, a couple of other ways you can be annotating, is to start your section by annotating your prediction. What do you think this text will be about with a star? And then annotate questions and answers. Ask yourself a few questions before you read, how and why questions are best, and then annotate those with Post-it notes and find the answers as you read. Today we're moving on to our fifth strategy, making inferences, reading between the lines. So sometimes authors don't spell everything out for us, right? And that's where inferring comes in. Authors don't tell us everything. That would make text boring. I have to infer. And that will help me understand not only deeper meanings, but themes. This is where the real analysis starts to happen. I want you to imagine, for example, I'm going to San Diego. I want to go to the beach, and I have never been to the beach before. I'm thinking to myself, what should I pack to go to the beach? I've never been there before. What can I infer that I will need while I'm at the beach? I start to think in my own head. I've seen pictures of the beach before. I have some knowledge. I've seen a TV show recently. It was called Rescue High Surf. That was set in a beach town. And I've also learned about the beach in school. I took a geography class and we talked about sort of the terrain and the environment around the beach. Okay, so using that knowledge that I already have, that evidence that I've already gathered, I can start to make inferences about the beach. I can infer because I've seen evidence in books and in TV shows and in pictures. I can infer that the beach has water. So I'm thinking already that I'm going to want a bathing suit and a towel because I'm getting in that ocean. I'm also inferring based on what I've seen before that the beach is hot because I've seen pictures of the beach and the sun is usually shining down and there isn't typically like a shelter where you could keep the sun off of you. And so I'm thinking that I want to bring some suntan lotion. Usually I burn pretty easily. Then I'm also thinking, excuse me, I'm also thinking that I want a place to sit while I'm at the beach. And pictures that I've seen of the beach show sand. And I know that if I sit in the sand, I've had experience with this, it's pretty itchy. And so I'm thinking I need to bring something to sit on. So I'm going to pack my camping chair, my kind of little folding chair. And I'm going to bring that with me to the beach because I think that might be useful. Again, I've never been to the beach before, but I've used evidence that I've seen in the past, and I've made inferences about the beach and about what I'll want to pack for my beach trip. We do the same thing when we make inferences. You're going to have gaps when you read a story. You're not going to understand everything. And that's the way authors write. They don't write every detail in a story. Imagine if every story included every tiny detail of everything that happened. Stories would be so long and so boring. But when you infer, you fill in the missing details so that you can uncover all of those deeper meanings and themes. Inferences aren't based on guesswork, they're based on evidence. So we make those inferences, we fill in those missing details based on evidence we've gathered. I didn't just say, well, when I go to the beach, I think I'll want some snow boots. And I don't know why, it just beach sounds like a place where I'd want snow boots. I used evidence. I thought about the things that I had seen in the past and used that evidence to make my inferences. So let's look at it. Let's pretend I'm reading a story. This is just an example. Let's pretend I'm reading a story and it says Melissa went to the library. And then it changes to the next chapter. Okay, Melissa went to the library. Why did she go to the library? The author didn't tell me. And this is a pretty simple example, but we see things like this in texts. So I'm asking myself, why did Melissa go to the library? The author didn't tell me. I start to use evidence. What do I know about libraries based on things I've seen in the past, based on what I've read? Well, I know a library is a place to borrow books. I know people can read books and magazines at the library. I know people can check out books at the library and then take them home. So I can infer that Melissa went to the library to check out a book. That's my inference. Melissa went to the library to check out a book. The author doesn't say Melissa went to the library to check out a book. The author just says Melissa went to the library, and then he switches to the next chapter. But I'm going to infer that Melissa went to the library to check out a book because that's what people usually do at a library. We're going to do a little practice on the next couple of slides about explicit information and inferences. I want us to understand the difference between those two things. Explicit information is in the text. Inferences are not in the text, but evidence supports it. So inferences are that reading between the lines. Explicit information is the evidence or facts that we base our inferences on. Let's do a little practice together of just knowing what's explicit, what's fact, and what's inference. Rebecca's mother woke her up at 6:30 a.m. "I have to leave early for work this morning," her mother said. "Please get up and get dressed so you'll be ready when the bus comes." Rebecca turned over and pulled the pillow over her head. Okay, I need to decide whether each statement is explicit, it's in the text, or an inference. So I'm going to look at this first sentence. Rebecca went back to sleep. Well, I'm doing a quick scan. I don't see anything in here that says Rebecca went back to sleep. She turned over and pulled the pillow over her head. I can infer that Rebecca went back to sleep, but that's not explicit. So I'm going to say I for inference. Rebecca went back to sleep. That's an inference. Let's look at the next one. Rebecca's mom woke her up. Rebecca's mother woke her up. That's explicit. That's in the text. So I'm going to say that's an E for explicit. Rebecca missed the bus. Let's see. I have to leave early. Get up so you'll be ready when the bus comes. Rebecca turned over and pulled the pillow over her head. I'm going to guess that Rebecca missed the bus, but because I'm guessing, that's an inference. There's nothing explicit in the text that tells me that. That's an inference. Rebecca stayed up late last night. Nope, I don't see anything explicit in the text that tells me Rebecca stayed up late last night. I can infer that based on the evidence. I can infer that Rebecca is tired because she stayed up late, but there's nothing explicit that tells me that. So when I go deeper with inferences, I get analysis. I'm sorry. So inferences aren't just about understanding the plot. They help you analyze characters and themes. So as a little bit of a wrap up, I want us to understand we can inference about a character or situation to uncover all of those cool aspects of analysis. An example of this would be I look at my evidence of Piggy's behavior and his words in the text, and I use that to infer his motivations and values. And that then helps me understand the themes of the Lord of the Flies. That's what you guys did with your indirect characterization assignments. And that still works here for, and that's the same thing we're talking about here with inferences. You're going to have a couple of inferencing activities on the next slide. Go ahead and get started.